Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today I have another monitor review for you, the Kali LP-8s. So before we even begin, thank you to Kali Audio for sending these out for me. Even though they did send these out to me, they have no control over what I say about the product, so these are going to be all my personal opinions and nobody else's. So let's dive into the specs just to start off, get the technical stuff out of the way, and then we'll get to a little bit more of my opinions and how I feel about the monitors. So for the specs, we have a 1-inch soft dome tweeter, we have an 8-inch optimized paper woofer or mid-range driver. They're front ported, which I think is pretty cool. These are the first monitors that I've tested to my knowledge that are front ported. Now that I say that, the Output Frontiers are front ported, but I forgot about this for a second, but it is a cool feature to have on a monitor of this caliber. There's 100 watts of total power for each speaker. They're active monitors. 40 of those watts are going to the tweeter and 60 are going to that mid-range woofer driver. As for the settings I tested on, I kept all of the settings on how they came out of the box. So the flattest, because I'm not close to a wall behind the speakers and I didn't find any of the room adjustments to fit where my speakers are in the room. Now I want to preface this review by saying that these speakers, for both of them, for an 8-inch monitor, are $500. So take everything that I'm saying about these monitors with that price point in mind. So if you watch my last HS8 review, the HS8s have been my daily driver for the past 2 years. Before that, it came from HS7, so I'm really used to that signature Yamaha sound, and I really do favor it for myself and my production. Besides those monitors, I've used some Focal Alphas, the Output Frontiers, I've used a pair of ADAM T7Vs and T8Vs, but those HS8s has been my main monitor, and I haven't really substituted anything while I've had those. These are the first monitors I've tried since I went to using the HS8s full time. Now I've been using these monitors for about a week today. I've been using them for the past several live streams that have gone up on my channel this past week, so I've gotten pretty used to them and how they sound during electronic music and just overall listening. Now even though these are on a budget end of monitors, I still wanted to make sure that my room is going to sound as good as possible because the monitors are only going to be as good as the room that they're in. So bad room, bad monitors. There's really no fixing it unless you listen at a low volume. And what's the point of listening on monitors if you're just going to monitor at low volume? Use headphones. So we briefly talked about this in the last video, but for you guys who didn't check out the last video, I have 3.5-inch insulation panels all around my studio area, as well as a cloud above me. The cloud is also 3.5 inches thick, but it is a lot wider than the other panels, which are about 2 by 4 feet. Besides those, I have some of these panels right behind me. These are just taking out some high-end reflections that my voice might have that you might catch on the mic. So they're not doing too much, but they are deadening the sound a little bit. I also have some of them on the ceiling, and I've placed some of them kind of strategically where I think there's going to be a little bit of resonances or flutter while I'm still working on getting more panels up. So again, just making sure the room sounds as good as I can make it sound so I can get an accurate representation of what these monitors are going to sound like and give you an accurate result so you can make a decision whether you like these monitors or not. Now for me, these speakers are 5 feet apart just about, and they're also 5 feet from each of my ears. We're in that kind of perfect triangle, give or take a couple inches, but I try to get them as close as possible so I can have a really accurate stereo image while I'm referencing different tracks on these monitors. Now my monitors are sitting on some pretty cheap monitor stands, but I have added some Dynamat to each of them to make the resonances get cut down so they're not vibrating or they're not having any tonal effects or producing tonal effects and distorting what the monitor should sound like. Now that's how my room's set up and some basic stuff about the monitors. What do I think about them? Now over the past week, I've been listening to a whole lot of music on these, just about 24/7 or as much as I can really throughout the day without my ears getting too fatigued. I've been listening to a lot of 90s rock, a lot of early 2000s rock, hip-hop, electronic music, even some more experimental stuff just to really get a full range on what these monitors sound like. And my overall thoughts is these sound really good. For $250 a piece or $500 a pair compared to spending $800 for the HS8s, I think these monitors could have served me very well if I would have chosen to get these over the HS8s. Now there's not to say there's not any compromises with the monitor like this, and I'll go over some of the compromises I feel like these monitors might have. Now in comparison to my HS8s, these monitors sound a tad boxy. Not to say that's a bad thing, but they just sound a little bit different, and I feel like in comparison they're a little bit more mid-forward. While I was listening to music, I was in Ableton and I was dragging an EQ band throughout the spectrum to see where I felt like those resonances were kind of coming through. And what I got was between 235-ish hertz and 400 hertz. Those frequencies really stuck out like they were at the very front of the monitor. Now, if it's mid-heavy, that's okay. Those are some of the frequencies that you want to pay attention to when you're mixing, but the HS8s don't have that, and I haven't had a problem mixing on them without that mid-forward presence. And because of those frequencies being panned up, I felt like I wasn't really like absorbing the sound. I feel like it was bouncing off my head a little bit, even though the speakers are pointed directly at me. Now, drawing back to the front port on the monitors, the bass is present, but it is a little bit muted, especially for an 8-inch monitor. I feel like I'm so used to the rear port on the HS8s, so I expected these front ports to be firing more heavily at me and get a better representation of the bass in the song, but this could be a combination of there not being the same wattage going to the speakers, the speaker design, or a group of other things. Now, one thing to note is there are a lot of people claiming that these monitors have some type of hiss when they're turned on, even if you're not playing any music. I haven't experienced any of the hiss, but out of the 2 review unit speakers that I got, the right one does have a little bit of a rattle when it's playing low notes. And I can hear this when soloing sub basses or synths with lower frequencies, where the right one just wants to rattle a little bit in the low end. Now, these monitors do show a very flat frequency range on the Kali website, and even though it didn't sound super flat to me and more boxy, what I wanted to do was show what our test track sounded like with these monitors through Ableton Spectrum, just to get an idea, albeit not super scientific, but of what frequencies these monitors are actually producing, and see that on the Spectrum. Now, even though I've said quite a few things that may sound like I don't really care for the monitors, all these things are very small nitpicks. A mid-forward monitor is something that you can get used to, as well as the bass sounding like it's a little bit more muted. And I could even argue that the sweet spot isn't as big as it is with the HS8s, but at this point, I'm being nitpicky because these are $500 per pair versus $800 for the Yamahas. And to be quite frank, these monitors sound really good. Now, where I think these monitors shine are listening to music where there's live instruments recorded, whether that be rock, whether that be metal, whether it even be country. I didn't find these monitors to be super transparent when listening to electronic music, and I found electronic music wasn't reproduced how I thought it should be or how I'm used to it being with my regular pair of monitors. I felt like I couldn't really hear instruments being panned left and right, or synthesizers for that matter, and even artists like Virtual Riot or Skrillex who really can nail their mix, I didn't really feel like it translated well on these monitors. Now, whether that be a good or a bad thing to make you strive to get your mix to sound even better if you're making that kind of music, that's up to you, but those are just some of the things I noticed. But I really had fun listening to these monitors, listening to a whole lot of Limp Bizkit on these, and it just sounded really wide for those live instruments. Rage Against the Machine sounded really good too, and just from a listening perspective, I can't complain too much with those things being stated. Now, with all these things being said, this is a $250 monitor. It's not crazy expensive in the world of monitors. It's very budget, a big monitor, and I think this would be an awesome starter set if you're looking into getting a pair of studio monitors. Now, for me, are these better than the HS8s? No. But for the price, these would be really hard to beat. For me, it wasn't hard to get used to how these sound and feel pretty comfortable mixing on them. So those are my overall thoughts. I hope that gave you some insight on these monitors, and if you're potentially wanting to pick them up, hopefully I was able to answer any questions that you might have had throughout this video. I'll have these monitors for a little bit longer, so if you have any questions for me, leave them in the comments below. And if you'd like to see me review any other of Kali's monitors, let me know, or tag them in the comments below and let them know. With all this being said, thanks for checking out the review. I hope you were able to make a choice, and we'll see you again in the next review.